What if everything you thought you knew about design leadership was wrong? Now, I've talked to a lot of mid-level and senior ICs who think that the logical next step is to become a director or something like that. But what does that even really mean? Will you suddenly be working more with budgets or allocating resources or dealing with HR requests and, God forbid, more meetings? Or will you be doing less of the hands-on work that got you into this field in the first place? And with layoffs across the board and most companies starting to lean out their teams, we're going to unpack new ways to lead that don't necessarily require giving up the work that you love. So stick around and we'll challenge that traditional notion of the management track and explore why some of the best designers are rethinking their path to leadership. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. I am so excited to introduce brand new, hot off the presses, the Beyond UX Design Merit-ish badges. You ever ship a feature that should have never seen the light of day, survive a sprint planning where nothing got planned, or maybe you just said, let's circle back under your breath for the 50th time this week? Well, you, my friend, have earned a Merit-ish badge. Introducing the Beyond UX Design Merit Badges, a vintage-inspired sticker series for UX designers, PMs, and engineers who have seen things. Choose from 3 sets: Soft Skills, Sharp Tongue, Cult of Figma Initiation, the Pixel Pusher Survival Kit, and more to come soon, so stay tuned. Each set of 5 badges celebrates the chaos, the coping, and the conference calls that should have been a DM. Stick them on your laptop, flaunt them at your stand-up, show the world you made it out of Q2 with your sanity mostly intact. Get 1 set of 5 stickers for $12 or 2 sets for $20 at beyonduxdesign.com/badges. Just promise me one thing: send pics and show me where you stick them. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas unsure where to start? Well, this episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI and user flows from apps you love, and content is added weekly, so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need, search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. My team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. And honestly, I can't imagine kicking off a new feature without Mobbin. So are you ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro today and never run out of inspiration again. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So when you think about your logical steps in your career, most people think I start off as an IC and then I move up to the management track. But what does that even mean? What does management mean? What does leadership actually mean? Do you have to do the HR requests and, asking off and people dealing with complaints and raises and bonuses and all that crap? Or does it mean you're not going to be able to do the work anymore? Well, it all depends, and it's up to you, and you can kind of craft your own path. So I am so excited to have my good buddy, Filippos Protogeridis, on the show today. Filippos is a product design leader based in London, currently head of product design at Manual. And for the past 14 years, Filippos has helped companies launch and scale products to millions of people, either as a founding product designer or as a design leader. Always driven by impact, he specializes in 0 to 1 launches and is a strong advocate for bridging business needs with customer problems. So I am so excited to have you on the show today. Filippos, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on, man. How is it going?
Same here, man. I'm super excited to be here. It's going really well. Really excited for today.
Hell yeah, me too. And it's funny. I got to start this off because we mentioned you're from Greece, but you have like an accent that is like clearly like almost Irish or British. I can't really place it, but it's so funny. First time we talked, I was like, "Aren't you from Greece?" But you sound like you're from the UK somewhere. I don't know. It's really funny.
I get it all the time. So like pure explanation is growing up in Greece, like tons of video games and movies. So you adopt a bit of an American accent. But then I moved to the UK like 6 years ago. So now my accent is this kind of like amalgamation of everything I've experienced in my life. But also my accent changes based on who am speaking to. So it's like if I'm speaking to someone that has like a heavy American accent, like subconsciously I'll change my accent slightly. But if I'm in the UK, I'll say some like things in a really posh way. So feel like my friends are gonna look at me and be like, "What the hell are you doing?" So yeah,
I love
it's
that,
just a
dude.
part of me. Like it's who I am. I can't change it.
I love it. No, it's cool. It's interesting. I love it. You know what? I would embrace it, man. Embrace it. So you've been doing design leadership for a long time, and I'm really excited to have your perspective on the next generation of leaders, all those mid-level senior ICs that are thinking about their next step in their career and what that actually means for them. So I'm really excited to talk about that. I would love to hear a little bit from you though, like about your background. How did you get into leadership, and what was your journey like? And then we'll kick it off, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a few words about me. Like I'm originally Greek, as you already said. Actually, I have more names than what you said, but I never say them out in the open so that I can use them as my icebreaker. So my full name is Filippos Protogeridis Cleopas. So like you can't get any more over the top than that in terms of like Greek names. I've lived pretty much the first part of my career in Greece. I started in design like 14 years ago, always in startups, really early stage companies. Generally speaking, I've always loved being an early stage designer type of person. I love the influence that comes with it. I loved working with founders, working with really cool ideas and cool startups. And then for the past 6 years, I've been in London. I've started working with a company called Manual, in which I was the founding designer, but then went on to become a design leader there and went on to take on like much more proper management responsibilities. And it's actually the company that convinced me to become like a full-time manager, basically. Because the rest of my whole life, I was always thinking, I never want to be a manager. I never want to deal with all of these things that you mentioned in the beginning. So it's been quite an interesting journey. And then last but not least, for the past year or so, I've been working on this self-paced product design course, which I'm going to talk a bit more about at the end. So I'm also posting a lot about what I'm learning on designery.com. But yeah, I'll share more about towards the end of the conversation.
I love that, dude. So you had the trepidation, I guess is a good word, before you moved to manager, and you were worried about all of that, all the stuff we just talked about, and the HR stuff, and dealing with people complaining and wanting raises and promotions, and you said you finally did it. So I'm really curious to kind of hear your background. It kind of begs the question then, are we thinking about design leadership the right way? And did you maybe have like the wrong notions in your head of what quote unquote design leader actually meant? And I'm curious what that was before. And then like, how did they convince you? What happened? What changed to get you to move to management, to leadership?
Oh yeah, like 100%. And I think pretty much every designer that I know has the wrong and inverted commas perception of leadership. Honestly, I wouldn't say that we've gotten leadership wrong. It's just I think people think of leadership in different ways, and they have this preconception of what, let's say, a very famous leader in an enterprise of 100+ designers says, and they take that at face value, and then they try and apply it to a startup of 10 people and 2 designers, and it doesn't work. And similarly, there's people that are trying to lead design organizations of 100, 200, 500 people and take advice from people that have led teams of like 2, 3 people. And it also doesn't work. So I think the thing that's so wrong, or like seemingly wrong, about leadership is that there's no one size fits all. And you really need to focus on what approach works for you. And similarly, there's so many types to go about leadership that if you're a designer, you're mid-level, you're senior, and you're thinking, oh my God, what is my next step in leadership? That step could take 1,000 different forms depending on the company and the role and the scope and how you make it to be. That there's no one way to approach it. So everything I've learned about leadership is that it was nothing like I was imagining. And there's actually a very flexible way to turn leadership into something that you can be proud of and something that where you can have the impact that you want. But it might just take a bit of digging to find the right organization to do this, the right size of organization to do this, the right team setup to do this. But there is a way to be a leader that really speaks to your strengths and your passions and the way that you want to operate as a leader, basically.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so you just brought up a couple of really great points, and I think this is maybe worth framing the conversation. Giving advice from one perspective and then taking that and applying it to your own situation may not always be the proper approach. So let's just talk about it from your own personal perspective. and your specific context, and anybody listening can take away what they want to take away. So I'm curious, like going from IC to leader in your specific example, and I'm not super familiar with Manual. That's a relatively small outfit, I assume. You started as the founding designer, which I guess means the only one, and then you worked your way up. Now you've got a team. What was that like going for you in your specific context, going from IC to leader? What kind of stuff did you deal with in that journey?
Yeah. I'd love to share a bit more about that. So just for a bit of context, like Manual is a health tech scale up in London. We're about 400 people in total now, but the product team is still quite lean. So I run a team of 8 designers right now, and we're looking at growing that number to maybe 10 or 12. So still pretty small in terms of a design organization, right? And we grew from, 20 people to over 400 in only 4 years. So that change was very rapid. So I'll tell you a bit about what that beginning looked like as a founding designer. And then as the team grew, like what were some of the key challenges, and also what was my perception of becoming a leader versus the actual reality, right? So like, first of all, before I say anything, my perception of being like a leader or a manager was basically what you were describing in the beginning, like dealing with budgets and scaling the team and not doing any hands-on work. And the trouble is, I've always loved hands-on work. Like I've loved being a designer. I still love it till this day. Like I love going into Figma or doing workshops and churning out designs and innovative solutions. So I always thought, hey, like I don't want to stop doing that, right? Like why would I ever become a leader? Which is why for a good majority of my career, I freelanced, I was an IC, I did everything I could to get away from the leadership track. But then when I found this one business where I was actually really passionate about what we were doing, and I thought, oh my God, like we're actually like walking the walk. We're changing people's lives. We're in healthcare. We're having a really deep impact on what we're doing. I thought maybe my impact could be like really significantly bigger if I actually start leading the team here. And I had a pretty clear vision of what the design team needed to be. I had a pretty good vision of what the product needed to be. So I thought, let's give it a go. But my one contingency was, I don't want to stop doing hands-on work, right? I don't just want to be a manager. And when I just spoke with the rest of the team, and I took advice from people that were in similar situations and product leadership, they were like, oh yeah, like we definitely don't want just managers in the team. Like we're such a small team. This is just not the right way to approach it. So one of my first realizations back then was there's no one type of leader. Like you can be a leader and you can be just a people manager. And this is something that probably for a big enterprise, it makes total sense. And, me as someone who's never managed a big team before, I would probably suck at it. But someone that has managed teams of, 100 or 200 or 1,000 people before, they would be amazing at it. So there's no one type of leader that works for like every type of company. In a smaller type of company, no matter who you are, there's going to be some hands-on work. You're going to have to make it work, and you're going to have to lead and manage, but also deliver some work and run some of those important initiatives. So it took me a while to figure out that balance. But once I did, I was actually extremely happy with it because I was able to start influencing decisions at a much bigger level. But I also didn't get away from the work that I was really enjoying doing, which was, going in there, really understanding problems, really coming up with solutions. So ultimately, in summary, there is a type of leadership that works for everyone, and we can cover that in a bit more detail. And it's all about finding that right fit and that right company size and the right company environment so that you can really be the leader that you deserve to be and the leader that you can be extremely like great at, essentially.
Yeah, I love that. So this is an interesting thing to think about. And I'd love to get your thoughts here. Something that I have observed over my, almost 25 years of working professionally is that, most people that end up being leaders, they get promoted because they were really good at doing the work. And often that promotion to leadership, it's a completely different job. Now, in our case, you might still be doing some of that hands-on work, but that job is very different. And what's interesting is, we go to school, we learn how to do the craft, and this is beyond just design, right? This is engineers, product managers, accountants, whatever, even plumbers, whatever. It doesn't matter what your job is. You generally tend to get promoted because you were like the star employee. And there's never, or most places, I would say, some places maybe do this, but there is very rarely an opportunity for training to become a leader, to become a manager. And so we're sort of just thrown into this management role without any really experience. Maybe you've had some really great managers, but maybe you haven't. And so I'm just sort of curious when we think about this idea of, you're not being a really good employee, being good at your craft doesn't make you a good leader. I'm kind of curious, like how you learn this, or how you've learned this, at least. I'll say you specifically, your experience. How did you learn to let go of some of those things that may have been like holding you back? Or actually, maybe take a step back. What were some of those things that were holding you back at first? And then we can talk about how you actually got past them. But I'm curious, what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, sure thing. So, and by the way, this is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I'm still trying to figure out in my day to day and becoming a better leader. So, I think there were a few challenges, right? I think one, when you become a leader, and especially like if you're in a high growth company, which means you're going to be doing a lot of hiring, like people really underestimate how important and how time consuming hiring is. Like this was my biggest challenge. And it was something that I never expected. I thought, well, great. Like I'll work with a few recruiters. I'll get some people in, like, great. We're just going to scale the team. Right. And I think my biggest learning was that hiring is like almost a full-time job for a manager or a leader that has hiring responsibilities. And you can't just like do it as a side thing. Like you really need to invest a lot of your time in like hiring amazing people and training those amazing people. So that was a really harsh realization. Did it totally wrong for like a few years. Now I'm starting to like figure out what works in hiring. The second most difficult thing about the transition was this aspect of letting go, right? Like you're doing all the work, like you said, you're getting promoted because you're the star designer in a company, and people are like, you're great. Like now transition to a leader. And you're like, well, now I'm actually not responsible for all the work. I have to trust others to keep that quality up. And that's a really freaking difficult thing, like really freaking difficult. And like for myself, because I was so passionate about my work, letting go and trusting someone else and knowing that I can't control everything. And all I can do is just train and give guidance and give that vision, but then fully trust other people, like first one, then two, then five, and 10 people to actually, turn that vision into reality. That was really freaking hard. And it was so hard because I didn't get hiring right, because I thought hiring was just one more thing. And when you get hiring wrong, then you can't really let go. You're actually hiring a few people and then you actually have to be there day to day and micromanage. Whereas in the right scenario, and what I've realized after 4 years of doing this, is that actually, like, if you hire the right people and if you fully trust those people, that makes letting go so much easier. And ultimately, if you hire people that are better than you, people you really respect, people that you're like, this person, no matter how expensive they are, no matter how difficult it is to get them, if you get them, they really change the game. That was the biggest learning for me. Everything else, honestly, every other aspect of leadership, like managing budgets and dealing with leadership, I find a walk in the park. But hiring great people and letting go, those were two of the most difficult things I've ever had to do in my career.
So, that actually begs the question, though. And this is something that, I just a little background about me. I got my first lead design role, and I wasn't manager necessarily, but I was the design lead. And when I worked at GE at the time, General Electric, big giant company, and they had this interesting way that they handled managers. They had dotted lines and solid lines, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that term, right? But anyway, so for anybody listening that isn't aware, a dotted line would be, or a solid line would be your HR type manager who, you go to them for performance reviews, you go to them for, your bonus conversations, raises. If you have a PIP or something like that, you're not doing well, you go to the HR type solid line manager. Dotted line manager would be the people who are not necessarily dealing with that, but they're leading the work. So I was like the dotted line manager for a long time, and I worked on this product at GE. And the interesting thing there is I was not in charge of hiring, right? That was not my role because that was the HR manager's role. But I was given a team of, 7 people or however many it was at the time. And it was just sort of all these random designers. Now, some of them were very good, some of them not so much. I actually was assigned one time this designer who they made a designer because he was a terrible engineer and they didn't want to fire him. So they made him a designer. I'm not kidding. So he ended up on my team. So anyway, that was sort of one of those things. I'm curious in this case, right? That was something I struggled with, the delegation, because, I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. You're not, I'm really good at this. And I thought I was really, whatever, if I was really good or not, but I thought I was really good at it. And I'm like, the quality is suffering. You're not doing as good a job as me. Just let me do it. I'll take over. I'll handle this. Let me fix it, And I struggled with that for a really long time. So anyway, the hiring, just like you said, that's the answer to fix it. But it begs the question, if you can't hire, you don't have a budget to hire, you're given the team, you're assigned a team. I would love to think, like, how did you get past that and sort of let go and be like, I can't control these things. I'm just going to have to go with it. It's such a hard thing to wrap your head around, because as designers, you're just like, the quality is so important. The quality is important. And this is not up to my own personal standards. So how did you get past that? Like, if you can't hire a team, what do you do? How did you do it? I'm curious what you did.
Yeah, it's such a hard challenge. So my experience has said that, look, as you say, you're not always in charge of hiring, and you can't always have amazing people, right? If everyone had like every person in the team being amazing, then we wouldn't be having these conversations, right? So I think there's a few things here. Like, I think one is ensuring that you're all aligned on like the culture of hiring and how you can get those amazing people. And even if that doesn't happen, like understanding what is someone's potential, how can you really mentor and train someone to be at the level that you expect? And then lastly, where do you need to actually be involved? Because unpopular opinion, I do think that design leaders should be involved. I just don't think they should be involved at every single thing in a way that just like disrupts everyone's work and says, actually, I know how to do this better, so let me do it. So I think if we start with the first one was very challenging for me because as a team, we were all like, okay, we need to produce amazing work. We're doing a health tech. Healthcare is so underserved in terms of design. We need to have amazing design. So if you have one person that controls all of this, that's easy enough. But if you have 10 people and one person to give direction, that's obviously really hard. So getting that alignment from the team, finance, budget, if you're not managing hiring, the person that manages the hiring, and saying that, look, what is the level that we're happy with? Like, do we have some positions where we're actually okay with people that are not, amazing, like a 11 out of 10? That's totally fine. Do we have some positions where it's really crucial to get those exceptional, like star quality players? Great. Let's be super aligned on that. And with every team that's growing, there's always going to be a number of different squads, a number of different people in different and more or less influential parts of a product. So you can always have these conversations and say, which are the positions where we really need those star players versus not. And the positions where you can get away with people that maybe need a bit of mentoring, a bit of training, that's totally fine. You need to be there and to train those people and to mentor them and give them direction. Those other positions, if you don't hire the right people, that's what it like lands up being a really problematic role and position. And it's really difficult for both the hiring manager who needs to have these difficult conversations, but also the person in that position that was sold this idea of, come join us and we're going to help you and this and that. But ultimately, no, you were hired to be at that level. So I think there's this really big distinction between those two types of roles, and getting that alignment with the team is so important. And if you have to argue for more budget to get some of those better, more senior people, more experienced people, then that's absolutely fine. And as long as you argue your case, I found that with a team that is sensible, you can actually argue and get buy-in. And then just understand which are the roles where you can afford to have people that are coming at a level of seniority, and you're giving them the road to perform better. And you're giving them that flexibility to really prove themselves and evolve as you go. So that will be one thing. And if you want, we can talk a bit more about that. Now, the second thing is, how do you really give people the tools and the resources to perform at their best, right? Because if you have the expectation that someone's going to come in and start performing the same way as you do, that's obviously like very unrealistic, right? They don't have the context. They're not used to working with your team. Maybe they're used to working in a larger team or a smaller team, or maybe they're just like trying to get a vibe for things. So the way you go about this, I think, is very different for each person. I've managed maybe, 20, 25 different people like over the course of my career. And some of them, in the first few weeks, they were able to get up to speed and actually had to do very little things. And then some others actually needed a bit of time to kind of get familiar and understand how things are working and what is good design versus bad design. So spending enough time to really gauge everyone and where they are and what are the tools that they need and how you can enable them to be successful, that's a really freaking difficult thing. And that is something that is very different for each person. And all you can do is have an honest conversation and say, like, this is the expectation. This is the help that I can give you. Tell me what I can do to make sure you're set up for success. And in an ideal scenario, you have this very clear expectation and you get people that are like, well, this is what I'm really good at. This is what I need some help with. Can you help me with tooling, with resources, with learning, with your support, with our one-on-ones to become better at these one or two things? And once you have that, that person can then perform at their best. Now, if you have this role like the one we were mentioning before, where you actually need someone to come in and kind of like take things away from you, you also need to align these expectations. And when you're hiring or where that person comes in, be like, look, I'm actually looking for someone that is potentially better than me. So like, here's everything that I can give you, but ultimately this is the expectation of the role. So clear expectations, clear path of development, and this really early assessment of what is this person amazing at? Where does this person need help in? And how can I be that catalyst to make that person be successful? Now, the third thing, which is where do you actually do hands-on work? I think that again is very different, like to for each person. And I think that really has to do with the type of leader that you're trying to be. I can only share my own experience because that's what I know and that's what I've tried. As I mentioned before, I love doing hands-on work. There's not a chance, like not in a million years that I would take a management role where I'm actually completely detached from the product because A, I love doing it, and B, I am the type of leader that leads by example. I like being out there at the forefront of what we're doing. And instead of saying, hey, this isn't great or this isn't solving that problem, you should do it in a different way. I like to be, how can we solve it in a different way? Like, let's get in a workshop. Let's jam ideas together. Let's figure this out. Like, let's work on this a bit more closely. And so instead of just going over every single decision that happens and saying, oh no, I'll do this better than you and just override it, I try and find what are those synergies that I can have with my team? What are the areas where I need to be a bit more hands on, maybe for a big product initiative, a big launch, a 0 to 1 thing where I might be leading or just supporting the launch? And what are the areas where I can let go a bit more and I can just give direction and I can trust that the work happens? And here again, if you ask 10 leaders, you're going to get 10 different opinions. What I've seen work really well is you have this kind of like dual speed or cadence in which you're working on. Like you're figuring out what are the things where I need to be very, very active and be out there in the open, and what are the things where I can just take a step back. And I think once you find that balance, you find that even the designers under you, the designers that you manage, actually really appreciate it. No one wants someone to micromanage every single thing they're doing, but many people appreciate a bit of direction and even a bit of hands-on help. Hey, if you tell me that this doesn't look good, or there's a different flow that we could use for this, or a different interaction pattern, well, walk the walk and show me what you think could be better, or give me a suggestion. What happened to me a lot in the past is I've had managers that were like, oh no, this looks terrible. Like this looks absolutely awful. Like we need to change it, and had no suggestion, no direction. And I was just like left alone to figure this out. So I knew that the type of manager I wanted to be was someone that has the level of craft and determination and an involvement with a day-to-day activity where I can actually go there and be, let's do this together. Let's work on this together. And I also know when I just need to provide, let's say, a vision of how something needs to happen, or when I can say, you know what, this is totally on you. I completely trust you. Like you just take this on. And if you need my suggestion, you can come to me and ask anything you want.
I love that. Yeah, that's an interesting thing you brought up too, right? Just at the end there about just the ambiguity. And that's something like I've noticed myself doing, and I've had to catch myself doing, is like with my team, I'll say something like, yeah, this could be this thing here or this other thing. And, I don't really know, but I imagine, and I have these big visions and big plans. And it's just, to me, it makes sense. But to them, it's just completely ambiguous. Like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And so that sort of leads me to the next point that I want to talk about is we talked about the hands-on work. It's interesting because like, I think everybody's got a different definition of what hands-on means, right? Like, does hands-on mean you're in Figma creating components and changing the border radius of a button and all that stuff? Or does hands-on mean, more like you're just in there in the meetings, you're part of the vision, you know what your team is working on because you're doing design reviews and design critiques on a regular basis, or you're getting in Figma, leaving comments and you seeing what they're doing and things like that. And I'm just like curious, like from your perspective, that idea of hands-on, like what does that mean for you when you say hands-on? Are you like, creating, prototypes yourself? Or you doing that? Or what does that mean? I'm curious, like, what is your definition of hands-on?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I don't think there's one definition. I think it really depends on what we're working on. So I would say that if I take the example of 1 month, right? In 1 month, I'll spend a big chunk of my time just like being involved in what we're doing and being involved in conversations and giving my feedback and giving my direction and leaving comments on Figma and trusting that my design team will move something forward, right? That is definitely part of my day to day. And it's something that, in our BAU, that's pretty much what I do most of the time. But then let's say we're working on like a really chunky business initiative, right? Let's say something new, something like a 0 to 1 launch, something that is really like business critical to get it right. Or maybe we have a huge like user problem, something that everyone's complaining about, and we really need to solve this ASAP. In those situations, I might just be a bit more involved than just like directing and giving feedback. I might just be like, hey, let's form this working group, like the 5 or 6 of us, like a PM, maybe me and another designer, a few engineers. Let's really, really work on this problem together. And at that point, I might just jam some ideas along with my other design peers. Like I might say, oh, this looks great. What if we did this? This looks pretty interesting. What if we did this idea and that idea? And at that point, I really consider myself just another designer in my team. I have no bigger voting rights than everyone else. I have no bigger influence. I'm just another person, because if you put two great minds into something, you're going to get something better than just having one mind at it, right? So that's kind of like a switching from, having this player coach mentality where you're trying to give direction, but you're also there being a player, being active and jamming with others and producing something. And honestly, this is one of the things that I enjoy the most about what I do. There's another type of hands-on work that I do, and I've actually enjoyed that a lot over the past 2 years or so, which is doing visioning work. Now, the thing that's beautiful about vision work is that it kind of answers that topic that you mentioned before of how do we deal with ambiguity? What if you have a team that doesn't really know what's the right direction, or doesn't really know what's the next step, or doesn't really know what the roadmap looks like, or what the product will look like in a year or 2 or 3 years from now? Something that I've found to be very successful is sometimes it's not about your involvement in the day to day and the short term and what you're doing now. Sometimes it's all about your involvement in that vision piece. So okay, I get what happens now, but what happens 3 months and 6 months and a year from now? So I'll give you a great example of this. We're working on this mobile app, and this mobile app is all about like helping people who struggle with obesity change their behavior over time. Like really, really complex piece of work, beautiful piece of work, like really, really interesting. Now, the biggest issue that our design team was dealing with was, okay, I get what I have to do now with my engineering resources. I don't fully understand what is the North Star and what is the vision. And so we did lots of rounds of visioning work and strategy with product leadership and the founders of the company and so on. But still, that wasn't enough, right? Because everyone can look at a presentation and be like, oh, yeah, like, okay, that's the vision. Yeah, everyone says the same thing about the vision, but I still don't get what that means. So what we actually did is we turned the vision from just like an idea to an actual concept and a prototype. So we said, okay, let's gather all together. And with the designers and the team, with everyone that was working on this like big, big product, we said, let's do a vision session. Let's really figure out what we would be doing if engineering resources were infinite, if we had all the time. Let's say we have 3 years to build this. Let's make it as incredible as we want it to be. That made everyone feel like they're actually building this together, right? It's not just one person from SLT coming up with the vision, this really abstract vision, and saying, now go deliver this. They were part of this. They were part of the workshop. They were voicing their thoughts on what incredible meant and what the North Star meant. And the second thing we did was to bridge that gap of what we're doing today versus that vision. I actually worked myself on turning that vision into something like a prototype. And I said, well, if I was to work on this so that I don't take my designer's time, so that we don't, take time away from the BAU, this is what I would actually do. Like really rough prototype, really rough mock-ups. And those things we did to do two things. One, to get a really proper buy-in from leadership and saying, yeah, we're actually buying into this. That makes total sense. And we're willing to invest a lot of funds and our team behind this. But the second thing it did is it allowed designers to finally say, hey, I can draw the line between today and that, because now you're giving the vision. And of course, it may not look exactly like that when we get there, right? All of those decisions that happen like in between will affect the final product, but at least this thing is not just a text piece in a slide deck and someone's PowerPoint. It's something that actually feels real, and I can make that connection. That for me has been one of the most valuable but also most fun things I've done as a leader. And it means I can still be hands-on, but not really overlap with the work that my designers are doing, but rather give them something that is really useful to them, be able to give them some direction that makes me feel more peace and saying that, yeah, as long as we're working towards that, like I'm happy with it. And thirdly, make sure that stakeholders and founders and people in SLT are like yeah, we're totally fine as long as you're working towards that vision. That I thought was really, really impactful.
Yeah, dude, I love that. It's funny you said this is literally the exact same thing that we're working on right now with my team. And when I think about hands-on work, that is the exact almost word for word same definition of what I try to do, which is, you know, give my team the opportunity to go and spread their wings, taking, some of that off their plate if I need to. Those quick turnaround things, I don't want to take their time off. It's like, oh, we have this really quick Tiger team thing that needs to take a week or two. Let me take care of that for them so they can focus on their stuff. Very similar stuff. And that visioning, man, so important. When we think about, and I honestly think a lot of this ties back to that quality and the delegation and that stuff like we talked about before. A lot of times, at least in my experience, when a team is not performing well, or the designers in your team are not delivering what you think they should be delivering, or, I think a lot of times it's because they don't know the direction that they should be going in. And that isn't their fault. I think a lot of times that ambiguity comes from the top. And having a way to express that long-term vision, to show them what they're working towards, I think it's amazing for the design team. I think it's amazing for the engineering team because they get to see the future state and they understand how they can build it today so that it can account for the stuff tomorrow. So they're building a solid foundation. I think the product team having that vision, seeing the vision, like they might have that vision statement, they might write all the stuff and put it in, Linear, Rally, whatever they use to track work, but having that image, that picture to see, it starts conversations, it gets people excited, and it just it clears up so much ambiguity. And that, for me at least, has been one of the most fun things that I can work on and bring my team together. I love the idea of the workshop, and they feel like everybody feels like they're part of it. They're building it together. You get the product team in there so that you get buy-in from the product team so you don't get, pushback from them later. That's just such a brilliant way to do it. I love that, dude. That's a great answer. Like for me, at least, that's the kind of stuff that I love the visioning. I love the forward-thinking strategy. Right now we're working on a 2-year roadmap. That sort of North Star statement and crafting that. And we're going to do a workshop, hopefully in person in the next couple of weeks, actually get a bunch of people together. So anyway, I'm super stoked about that. I love that, dude. That's one of my favorite things. So I want to talk a little bit next about shift the conversation a little bit towards the people who are thinking about becoming managers and thinking about what's right for them. So you mentioned a couple of weeks back, we talked this idea of the different types of managers. And you mentioned this earlier in the call. I want somebody thinking about becoming a manager today. They might have a sense and they might say, it's not for me. What types of, talk to me a little bit, thinking about those types. How can people think about the leader they want to be so that they can start having those conversations with their manager to get to that next step?
Totally. And let me just caveat this by saying every company's trajectory is also very different, but I'll tell you a few things that you might encounter in your journey on becoming a leader and what those might look like. And hopefully this helps the audience make a decision. So first things first, if we think about the different types of leadership, I think there's 3 core types. And then of course, there's other things that people might encounter. The first and most typical one that people talk about is your people management. That's your director roles, that's your VPs, that's your perhaps some head of roles. Anyone that really has the sole purpose of managing a team and managing people and managing budgets and getting buy-in from leadership and then actually not doing any hands-on work. And like we mentioned before, this is a role that traditionally has been the only management role that you would see in some businesses up until, startups and scale-ups started becoming a thing and people started realizing, well, do we actually need many people to just manage when we're just a small team? And that kind of created a second type of leader, which was this blend of, people manager plus IC. And that's what I often describe as the player coach type of leader, even though different people might give different definitions. And that is someone that has some direct management responsibilities, but also has some hands-on responsibilities. And a great example of this is in many teams that's called a lead product designer. In some other teams, you have heads of product design that have some hands-on responsibilities. And that's kind of what describes my current role at Nanyo. So that is a type of role where you do have some management responsibilities. Maybe like you said in your example, maybe you don't manage hiring, but you do have some line management. You have some people under you. You need to give them direction. You need to give them mentoring, but you also do maybe a bit of hands-on work. And that I think largely depends on the company size. The smaller the company, the more that hands-on work will be required from you. The larger the company, the more likely it is that, you know what, even in these roles, you will do just a tiny bit of hands-on work, but then most of it will be people management. And then the last type of leader, which we've seen and heard about a lot in the last few years, is this idea of the super IC, right? So and I love this, by the way, and I would love to like maybe go a bit deeper on this. And a super IC is this person that, doesn't directly manage anyone. It's this person, and if you're in the audience and you're thinking, I never want to be a manager, I just want to be doing my work and perfecting my craft. That's that type of role that we're talking about. A leader, at least to me, doesn't necessarily have to manage people and lead a team, right? A leader is someone that influences. A leader is someone that sets the example. A leader is someone that's crucial to the success of the business. So I think you can be a leader if you're just an amazing IC in the same way that you can be a leader if you're a great people manager. So I'm going to stick to this third point because I feel like, including myself, many people are thinking about this leadership or management path. They're thinking, hey, I can make more money as a manager, or my company just has a management track. So I'm a senior or I'm a lead person. I can now only go down that route. And the truth is that what we see in modern businesses is that there's many teams out there that actually favor this super IC role. And they're basically saying, you know what? We don't need too many people just managing, because there's some people that are amazing at managing others. There's some people that are amazing at working with leadership and getting buy-in and managing hiring. And then there's some people that are just not great at it, but they might be amazing at their craft. And someone that's amazing at their craft, whether that's an engineer or a designer, pretty much anyone, can still be an amazing and very impactful leader. So if you're someone that is, really having this debate in their minds and thinking, oh man, I'm not sure if I want to become like a manager, there's tons of companies out there that aren't looking for pure managers. They might be looking for hybrid manager hands-on roles, or they might actually be looking for these super IC roles where you're staff or principal level or senior principal, or call it whatever you want, and you're seen as a leader in the business, but without having to manage anyone. And the only big difference with that third type of role is that instead of managing by having people under you, you're almost like you're mentoring, you're giving people the direction. You're there as the best example of craft and quality in the business. So ultimately, people come to you for direction and people come to you with questions, but you don't have the management responsibilities. So I'd say there is a way to be a leader, even if you go down that IC route. It doesn't work for every business out there. So you need to be really conscious of what businesses am I applying for? If I'm in my current business and I only have a management track, can I have a conversation with leadership or with a person above me to figure out if this is a possibility for me? But I definitely say that this is a trend that we're seeing a lot in recent years. It mostly works in smaller businesses because, as I mentioned, in bigger businesses, you definitely want like people managers. But it's something that I personally feel very passionate about. And because I'm seeing it from the lens of a small team, I can just see how impactful it is.
Yeah, dude, I love that idea too of the super IC principals, senior staff level type stuff. And just like you said, this is interesting to point out, like it depends totally on the company, because a lot of times you're limited not by your skill set or even by what your manager wants to do with you. You're limited by just the HR bureaucracy and the red tape.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't have that band. We don't have that title yet. And, so then you really are sort of limited. And that's like a good question that you went back all the way, I think, to the beginning about like, is that the right place for me to move to the next place, the next role, the next step, the next level? And so that's like a really great question. But what I've also seen, and it depends on the company, those roles can be created. It really depends. Like it's sort of one of those things where, and I've had a manager talk to me about this in the past too, and I loved how they put this in a perspective. The time to talk about a promotion is not at your performance review at the end of the year, because then it's way too late. Budgets have already been established for the next year. So if you want to get that next role, give your manager time to have the conversation with HR, and if it's a small team, maybe they can move a little faster. If you're at a giant multinational conglomerate, you're probably limited in some way. But don't wait until you have your end of year performance review to say, yeah, when am I going to get that raise? Or when am I going to get that promotion to manager? When am I going to get the promotion to principal? Start that conversation early in the year before the budgets are set so they can influence that conversation. And I think a lot of people, they'll just wait until the performance review at the end of the year to start having this conversation. So anyway, that's something that I think a lot of people, they tend to think about. Something else I want to talk about too is sort of like really interesting. We're talking about, and you just mentioned this, and you didn't say layoffs necessarily, but I'm sort of putting those words in your mouth. But layoffs are, all over the place. You've got companies laying off tons and tons of people, and so they're starting to lean out. They're starting to what can we do with less resources? How can we keep our production, for lack of a better word, up with half the amount of people? And so I'm curious what your thoughts are there as far as how that impacts what a quote unquote leader looks like. What does that mean for us in the next year or two?
That's it's such a nuanced question. I think it definitely again depends on the type of business. I think we've definitely seen a very big shift in the trend of like hiring for managers. What I've seen, I mean, I've obviously seen the UK market, but I've heard like similar things are happening in the US market. There's very few roles actually that are for people management. And often these roles are literally going through executive, like recruiters, like going directly to the people. Most open roles are for ICs or hybrid IC leaders. So we had this concept of a design manager, which, we have design managers everywhere. Now there's not a single like job post for a design manager. And the reason is that, of course, because of the way the VC industry was for a good 5-6 years, people had a lot more capital and a lot more headcount to play with. So naturally, that meant more people in pure management roles. Now, with all the layoffs, with the change in the VC market, with companies having less capital and trying to stay leaner, what we're seeing is definitely that switch. So less people in pure management roles, heads of, or even directors of product design moving into this blend of hands-on versus management, and also much fewer roles for management and product leaders. And basically, most companies are thinking, well, if we had a third or a fourth of our headcount, how could we make things work? Now, I think that's a really nuanced topic. And again, I'm going to give my opinion as someone who's always seen things from a early stage startup scale up perspective. So I'm sure many people that are working like big multinational conglomerates, as you say, may not agree with this. But I think there's two sides to this. I think being lean is not bad. Like being lean actually helps you move at speed and it helps you make those decisions in a much more nuanced and considerate way. So instead of thinking, hey, I can hire 50 people, let me just hire people and create roles for them, you're thinking, well, I can hire 10 or 20 people. So I need to be much stricter with who these people are and what are their roles for these people. The second thing it means is that, you know what? These traditional managers now may have some hands-on responsibilities. And again, that's not for everyone. If you go ahead and say, hey, you know what? You've been a manager here for 5 years. Now, actually, suddenly you need to go back to Figma. That's just not going to work, right? And I've heard this from so many people. It's unfortunate. It doesn't always happen because it was planned, right? But I've heard many people that were in management positions. Maybe they were doing a bit of hands-on work, and suddenly there were layoffs, and suddenly these people are asked to go back to doing hands-on work. It just doesn't work because, again, they are the types of people that perform their best when they have a team under them and when they're giving direction and when they're giving vision. So if you ask those people to change to something they're just not going to perform. Because again, if you're an amazing manager, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be an amazing IC and vice versa. Now, on the flip side of this, there are some teams and there are some companies where they might actually make this work. So if you make a decision and you're like, you know what, we don't have a large headcount, we need to make it work with fewer people. So we need to bet on people that could do a blend of both. That's when you can actually have some people being product design leaders, maybe being promoted to leaders with a clear expectation that you're not giving away your hands-on work completely, but now you're also having some management responsibilities. So maybe you're promoting some people to leads, or maybe a hands-on head of role. And these people can actually perform pretty amazing. It's just that you shouldn't expect that these people will be, amazing at management and managing budgets and managing hiring and mentoring and amazing at the craft. You're going to have to compromise on something, right? You can't have everything. But I do think there is a clear opportunity in businesses trying to make those decisions and trying to make it work with less managers and therefore giving way to more people that are more hybrid, people that do some hands-on design like we're discussing and some management responsibilities. And even if that means, and again, this is where it gets very unpopular, a very startup friendly, but not very enterprise friendly, even if that means that you give some people more ownership and autonomy because you can't manage their work day to day, I think that's fine. I think that's beautiful. I think that's how startups work and how you have a small team and everyone wears multiple hats. And I think it works really, really well. So even if some teams need to get back into that mode, what I call like founding designer mode, where you actually need to take on a few more things, and even if not everything is perfect, you're actually moving the company forward. I personally think that's fine. And it's something that we've seen even at Manual and even some other businesses that I'm mentoring or consulting actually works quite well. If sometimes when you give people more ownership and accountability and say, look, we have fewer resources, we need to make it work. How do we create an environment where you can still do your best work, but actually you're a bit more influential to the business and you can start making those decisions? There are some people that perform amazingly well in these environments. And there are some people that will find this really, really pressurizing and really stressful. So if you're in a situation where you're pushing someone to do something that's out of their comfort zone and it's stressful, they're not going to do it well and they're not going to be happy at what they're doing. But if you find those people that are up to the task, there's no reason why you can't turn these people into hands-on leaders. And there's no reason why they won't be really, really successful at what they're doing, even if they don't have that resource and all the people around them and all those extra layers of hierarchy. Anyway, I know this is a very like debatable topic, so I would love to hear what you think and what you've seen from the other end of the spectrum.
I love that, dude. Well, I've spent most of my career in giant enterprise orgs, 1,000 engineers, hundreds of designers, and it's interesting because I still feel like you just mentioned founding designer mode. This idea of like, it makes me think of like being a scrappy designer, doing less with more, or doing more with less, not less with more, obviously. Doing that would be bad. Doing more with less, and I just think about this idea of entrepreneur, right? Someone who's inside of a large org that thinks like an entrepreneur, that can figure out how to get things done within the constraints they have. And, as a designer at a startup, you've got tons of constraints and you figure out how to do things and get things done. A designer in a large organization, especially like a large enterprise, has different constraints, but should still take the same approach. Like, what can we get done with the constraints that we're under? Right. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind. Like, no matter what company you work for, you're going to have constraints, right? And I think about a founding mode too, just like like unknowns and everything going crazy. And you mentioned this, I think in the last time we chatted, but like embrace the chaos. It makes me think about that coming up in the next like 6 months, like 3 years. I don't know. Donald Trump is taking the markets and like turning them upside down. Like stock market is like going insane right now. Obviously, for whether you're in a large company or a small startup, that market chaos directly impacts your day to day. I just think like you're absolutely right. I don't think it matters if you're in a large enterprise. People think of large enterprises quote unquote safe. They think of like big companies as like safer than startups. I don't think that's true. I worked in a large enterprise, got laid off twice. So like that to me is not at all safe. It's just a different place to work. It's a different environment to work, but there's still that chaos. There's still that uncertainty. There's still that ambiguity. There's still the volatility. Maybe it's a little bit more complex, but maybe not. Depends on where you work. But I think for me personally, I love that idea of founding designer mode, and just thinking outside the box, not waiting for someone above you to tell you what to do. When you've got ambiguity, you go and you just explore and you just figure things out and you uncover insights and you share the information and you throw something out there, hopefully sooner rather than later, and get feedback and figure out the right path forward. I mean, that's to me what you would do at a startup, and it's what you should be doing in a large enterprise as well. So, I don't know. For me, I think you're absolutely right. You're on track. I don't know. I'm totally on board with it. I think it's the right approach. That's what I would do personally.
It's a really interesting one. Like again, biased opinion from a person that's been like a 4 times founding designer. There's something so beautiful about the chaos of being in founding mode, when you're working with a small team and you're like, hey, what's the process for this? So like, we have no process. You come up with a process, and like, who cares about the process? It's like, let's get it right and let's get something out. So I think, as you were saying, like wearing multiple hats, being entrepreneurial, not waiting for a brief or a decision and like making that decision, there's something that I find really inspiring and beautiful about. Now, the big caveat here is not every org allows for that, right? Or enforces that. And I've also had many conversations with people that weren't in small scale startups or scale ups. And I was like, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you take more ownership? And they were like, well, I tried to do this and then I got told off and I got a bad performance review because I was actually not supposed to do that. So I think first, obviously, you need to sense check if you're in an org where you can be more entrepreneurial. And sometimes the answer is you aren't, right? And that's totally fair because that's just how the world works. But if you are in a situation where you can be more entrepreneurial, I think we will see a big trend in the next 1 year to like the next 5 years where people will become more entrepreneurial with the market being like you said, like with the rise in AI technologies and like the ability for a designer to take an idea and turn it into like a working product or prototype in literally a matter of hours, I think this entrepreneurial mindset becomes extremely impactful in teams. And that's when we go back to this, super IC role or like this idea of the founding designer mode where, you know what, if you were at a startup, you would just be given, here's what this company needs to do. Now you go ahead and figure it out. If that requires you doing illustration, sure. If that requires you like spinning off a website, sure. If that requires you speaking to like 50 customers because you really need to figure out something, then you go ahead and do it. This mentality is something that I think many modern teams are missing. And when you find someone that has that natural knack of like being more entrepreneurial, I like to give them, all the like the support and power to say, you go ahead and do it. Like, don't ask me for permission. Like, just go ahead, do it, and ask for forgiveness, right? So I think we're going to see more teams embracing that because of everything and because of AI and because of where the world is going and how teams are leaning down. And I do think that everyone can take small steps to just take in a bit of that founding designer mode, a bit of that, hey, what if I was to wear like a few more hats? What if I was to go a bit beyond the scope of my work and a bit of what was asked from me? What if I was to sit back and saying, what is my team expecting of me? Can I actually take on something more and just get us where we need to be, even if it wasn't briefed into me directly? I find those people to be extremely influential and impactful in the businesses. These are some of the people that you never want to lose. I know that these are some of the people that I never want to lose in the teams that I manage and I work with. So yeah, I really believe in this founding designer mentality. But of course, again, with a caveat that it's not for everyone and you can't always do it. So like, don't take this and be like, hey, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want. And then your manager goes like, what the hell are you doing? Like we said no.
Yeah. Well, I think again, like founding designers though, like even at a startup, right? A founding designer, and I've never been a founding designer, so I'm inferring here. But I imagine there's still constraints. They say go do whatever you want. You don't have complete control. You still got to go talk to your leadership team, whoever your supervisor manager is, and make sure you're aligned there. And so, I still think I would imagine at least, even in a startup, you don't have free reign to go do absolutely whatever you want. You might be asked to do more things, like you said, illustration or branding or whatever, that you might think beyond your traditional role as a product designer or UX designer. But you still you can't, you have to go and like design within your constraints or act within your constraints. I think like even a large org, so I don't know, maybe I think it's, I don't know. I think it's like maybe more broad too, because like more applicable maybe than not. But I feel like even in a large company, a large team, you're still working with your manager. And I would imagine most managers, because I would appreciate this, would want you to think outside the box, bring ideas, bring these things to the table and suggest things to help them because they might not have come up with these ideas, on their own. So I don't know, man. I personally, I feel like I feel like that mentality, that founding whatever mode, founding product, founding engineer, like I think that mentality across the board is just like, I kind of almost think of it too, sort of like one aspect of that is managing up and helping your management team to understand the constraints or understand things they might not be aware of and help mitigate things or help bring ideas, help them decide things, bring them the information so they can make a decision to move forward if that's what they need to do. So anyway, I don't know. I think that's pretty applicable regardless of the company, just taking that founding approach. I think the worst thing anybody could do is just sit around and wait for someone to tell them what to do, regardless of the role, So I don't know, man. I love that. Cool. All right, Filippos, we've had you for a little bit now. Before we get out of here, I got some questions I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. But before we do that, any closing thoughts? Anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about that you think is important that we want to talk about?
I think we talked about many important topics. I think as a closing remark, right? I think especially for people that are considering being more entrepreneurial, we talked about this founding designer mode. To me, like it boils down to a few simple things, right? Let's say you're given something and you haven't been given all the answers. How do you go about finding all the answers yourself, without asking your manager? Like, how do you actually go and wear multiple hats and ask the right people? I think that's one of those things that for a manager, especially, it's so important. And it's such a breath of fresh air when it happens from a person that you're managing, that I think this is the one thing that everyone can do, like you said. The second thing is challenge things. I think the thing that a founding designer or a founding engineer needs to do on a day-to-day basis is you get this founder, they have this great idea, they're like, oh, this is the best thing. And you challenge them all the time, because ultimately some of them may not be product people, and everyone can have opinions. That doesn't mean that they have great opinions. And what happens with many of those founders is their opinions are very wrong and they just haven't been tested. So challenge everything as if you're a founding designer. Say, okay, I've been given this brief, this PRD, call it what you want. I don't necessarily agree with our approach here. Or why are we taking this approach? And are we open to exploring different approaches? Or even things like, is this a problem actually? Like, is this what we should be focusing on? Those are the really difficult questions that the average person may not make, because they're like, hey, this is what I've been given. I'm just going to go ahead and execute on it. But a founding designer would be like, actually, this doesn't make any sense. I think we need to go back to the drawing board. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge. Of course, do it in a sensible way, right? No one likes someone that challenges every single thing. But if you feel like something needs to be challenged, then challenge it. And thirdly, figure out, like, instead of saying this is not on me to do, this is someone else's job, figure out, could you actually do it? And like, get away, without the added middlemanning and asking and this. Like, could you actually do it? Could you maybe use AI to come up with like an illustration or something like this? Could you actually go and write some content instead of waiting for your content team to reply and put a brief together and so on and so forth? I think some of these questions, especially with AI, are going to start become really, really interesting for designers. So we'll just take a step back and think, could I actually do this myself and relieve, 5 or 6 other people from doing something really small? If I can do it myself, maybe I should be doing this myself. And maybe I need to ask for some permission, or maybe I just need to give people a heads up and say, by the way, let me take this on. But I do think that is the right approach. And I do think that is the founding designer mentality.
I love that, dude. Yeah. I think even if, this is maybe a really great way to close this conversation out. Even if you have no interest in becoming a manager or a leader, that doesn't mean you can't take some of those ideas and apply them to your current role, like, leadership behaviors or whatever you want to call them. I actually love this idea of followership, right? It's like the opposite of leadership. It's the yin to leadership's yang. I have a whole chapter in my book about followership. I've interviewed Dr. David Leitner, who's an amazing, he's a character. He's a great guy. Talks about followership all the time. He's written a bunch about it. But it's the idea that, just like we've been talking about, it's taking some of that mentality and applying it to your job. It's taking that leadership concept, not quote unquote leading, but being a follower, which like sounds like robots or sheep, but it's way more than that. We could talk about followership for, hours, but to me, that's just like a really great way to think about this. Even if you don't want to be a leader, quote unquote leader, you're going to be a follower. How do you be an effective follower? How do you be a courageous follower who brings things up and changes things and helps implement some of these things that the leadership team has come up with? I think it's an amazing way to think about it. So awesome. All right, Filippos, this has been amazing. Like I said, I've got 5 little questions I like to ask all my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. First thing that comes to your mind, you don't have to think too hard about it. What is your favorite non-design book?
Well, I'm a bit biased because I've just been reading a lot of science fiction lately. So I'm a huge fan of the Red Rising series. That's been honestly such a breath of fresh air and reading. I can't think of maybe the in terms of non-fiction book, I would say Shoebog, like the history of Nike. That's definitely one of my like top 3 books of all time.
I love it. Red Rising, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh yeah, if you're into fiction, like this is honestly epic.
Is it like a bunch of books, a big series, like a lot of?
It's like 6 books. I think they're
okay.
launching a 7th now. Yeah, I've gone through like right 3 of them in a few weeks' time. It's so addictive.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. So it's not like Lord of the Rings where they're like, thousands of pages.
They're quite easy. They're quite easy.
Okay. Game of Thrones kind of stuff. Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like Game of Thrones, like it's a giant series, but then not only that, each book is like, the freaking, I don't know, like twice the size of the Bible or something, like I can't read all this stuff. All right, so I haven't checked that out. Red Rising. I've been looking for a new fiction series to
Check it out.
'cause
Check it out. It's
I've
super
mostly
addictive.
been like nonfiction, like history books and stuff, but like I don't know. It's good to change it up. I'm looking for some fiction stuff. Red Rising. I like science fiction.
Which history book do you recommend?
Oh man, so I this is gonna sound weird, but I am really into like the historic, the like the non-religious but historic books, like his nonfiction books about the Bible that are not religious.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like Bart Ehrman is one of my favorite authors, but he's actually a former evangelical turned atheist who writes about scholarly works about the Bible. And he's got this really interesting book. One I think is probably his bestseller is called Misquoting Jesus, but it's basically talking about like how the Bible has changed, and it's got like over 300,000 discrepancies between like every version written. So if, you know, not to get like too political or whatever, but like, you know, if you believe the Bible is the infallible word of God, how could there possibly be 300,000 discrepancies between the things, you know? So anyway,
Super interesting.
Bart
I'll check
Ehrman
it
is
out.
like one of my favorite. Yeah, I like, and he's really easy to read too. He's like a biblical scholar, but he writes in like a very easy, digestible way for like non-scholars. So anyway, it's good stuff. That's like, I've got a ton of, my wife always like every time he comes out with a new book, she buys that for me for like Christmas or something. But he's got like a ton of really great stuff. Anyway, one is like really interesting about like the Gospel of Judas. So like, you know, like ancient Christians were, you know, a lot of it was like written in Greek and stuff. And so they found like a lot of these Greek manuscripts around Greece and stuff. And one of them was like, you know, the Gospel according to Judas, which is like really interesting to think about, like Judas's perspective. Like, you know, everyone thinks about Judas as like this traitor who killed Jesus essentially. But if you think about it from his perspective, like if he hadn't done that, Jesus wouldn't have died. He wouldn't have raised from the dead, and you wouldn't have Christianity.
Yeah.
So like, why is everybody hating on Judas? You know, so it's really interesting. But there's a whole gospel written, and he like analyzes it from like ancient Christian perspectives, but like in
Super
a
interesting.
non-religious way. Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know, as like a Western European descendant, you know, it's kind of like fascinating to think about like how all of that has like influenced our culture over the last 2,000 years. Anyway, I'm not religious at all. I would consider myself atheist, but like I just love reading about the Bible. It's like really fascinating to me. But anyway,
fascinating.
Now, long answer to that.
Have a look. No, because I do really appreciate history, but I haven't been lucky with history books. Like I've loved history podcasts. Like How to Take Over the World is one of my all-time favorite podcasts. I'm not sure if you know it. Yeah, and that's how actually I got into history. But yeah, I've tried a few history books. I've read some of the more modern ones, like, you know, ’Sapiens, for example, like as a summary of history. So some of these books I find really interesting. But yeah, I still haven't found some that really ticks the boxes. So yeah, I'll take a look.
Yeah, dude, check it out. All right, ’Sapien was an interesting one. It was like the problem with ’Sapien though was just it was so broad. It covered like so many things. Like I kind of wanted to go deeper into some stuff.
Yeah, you can't go deep.
It was also like just such a giant book too. It was like so big. And then he's got follow-ups to it. Anyway, I only read the first one. I haven't read the other ones. But all right. Next up, what is your favorite non-design podcast? So it might be a history podcast.
Okay, so Acquired and How to Take Over the World. Very easy.
I haven't heard How to Take Over the World.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's definitely history, like narrated by a person that's like really far from your typical historian. So I find it super engaging. It's always like features of a really strong, you know, important historical figure. I found it a fascinating way to explore history through like the people that made it, basically. And then they also like analyze the patterns and what they see as kind of like the similarities between different like historical leaders. Super interesting. So yeah, How to Take Over the World and Acquired. I'm a big fan of Acquired. Like really, really loved hearing it between like behind the scenes of some of the, you know, super interesting companies out there. So yeah, big fan.
Yeah. I love that, dude. All right, cool. I'm going to check out. I know Acquired. I'm going to have to check out How to Take Over the World.
Check it out.
All right, next up, what is your favorite meal? This could be something that you've had at a restaurant, something your grandma used to cook, something you cook yourself. Favorite meal?
Look, I have a very easy answer for this. Like, as a typical Greek, you can't beat souvlaki. Like, honestly, it's like, if there is a God, like God's gift to like the culinary world is souvlaki. Like, you can't go wrong with, you know, paying like $2 to $4 for something that tastes so good. It's just like it shouldn't be there. Like, it's just too good to be true. But like, if we're talking about like, I'm a very simple guy. Like, I really like steak and fries or like something like that. So nothing beats a good simple steak for me, like and potatoes. But then if I am to talk about like street food and stuff like that, just nothing beats souvlaki. Like, it's just amazing.
I have not really had a lot of, I would say, like authentic Greek food. But there's this
You
one
should
place
come
in
over. I have
Nashville.
so many tips.
Yeah. Oh,
If
hell
you
yeah,
can make the
dude. Yeah,
flight,
sure.
like, I'll take you around. Let's do a souvlaki tour.
Throw the kids in the back of the station wagon. We'll head over to
Let's-
Greece.
Man,
I've got
they'll love souvlaki. Just come over here.
dude, my kids, they would that. Well, this is what I was gonna say. So, there's this place in Nashville called Greco. It's called Greco Greek Street Food, which is a weird name. I guess Greek. I don't know. So anyway, but Greco Greek Street Food. It's in Nashville, and it's like our tradition. We drive home from New Orleans back home to Cincinnati. We always stop there on the way home. And my kids hate most things, but they love souvlaki. Like they just like whatever it is. Like there's this place will do like souvlaki. Like they have shrimp, they have salmon, they have steak and chicken, they have pork, they have lamb, they have octopus souvlaki. They have like everything. And like my kids won't eat the octopus, but they will literally eat souvlaki like rice and meat on a stick, grilled on a stick. But they won't touch if it's, and the other thing, my kids love like olives and stuff like that. So they actually like Greek food, and they like tzatziki and like yogurt and stuff. My kids are interesting. They have a really interesting palate. But then like my other kid, they'll eat capers, they'll eat olives, all that stuff. But then they won't eat pizza with pizza sauce, which like I don't understand. And they don't like French fries. I'm like, what does it matter with you guys? It's interesting. But they eat like capers and sauerkraut and they shit like that. Anyway,
yeah,
interesting.
My son's a bit like that. That's quite interesting. Yeah, he won't devour a pizza like a normal any average kid would do. But like, yeah, he loves capers for some reason.
Really?
Like
yours too?
pickled ginger.
All right.
Like,
I've never, dude. I've never met another family whose kids love capers. Like my kids this morning, dude. I made for them breakfast. We have cinnamon raisin bagels, and I got them cinnamon raisin bagels with cream cheese. And they're like, "Can we have some capers?" And I was like, "That is so disgusting." Cinnamon raisin caper, because they love like bagels with salmon and capers, like lox and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't like the red onions, but they like the salmon and all that, smoked salmon and cream cheese and capers. But then they have like cinnamon raisin bagels with cream cheese and capers. It's so weird, man. My kids are so bizarre. I love that like you have kids that like capers.
Oh yeah.
Too. All right.
My son asks for like all the spices, so he'll put like paprika and cinnamon, and so he'll combine like sweet and savory stuff and turn it into a paste and just have that paste with like his fingers. It's
how old is
disgusting. Like literally, she's 2. But maybe there's like a culinary genius in him. Like I'm sure many of the greats like started like that. That's my hope. Maybe. Dude, I don't know.
Seriously, man. Like cultivate that over time, dude. This is a real funny story. I got the next question about vacation, but this one story is really funny. My wife, the other day, there's a little market around the block from our house. So it's like corner market kind of thing. And she went in there and got like a baguette and some other stuff. And she picked up like a little jar of capers. And Michelle, the woman that owns it, she was talking to my wife and she was like, "Oh, what are you making?" Like, thinking we're going to make something fancy. And she's like, "Oh, it's for my kids for their Easter basket." She was like, "What?" Because we were going to put like a jar of capers instead of chocolate because they like capers. Anyway, I thought you'd appreciate that.
All right. I really do appreciate it.
Tell your family. Your wife will appreciate that. All right. What is your favorite vacation spot? Most people answer Greece. I'm curious. Do you say Greece?
Greece, like hands down. Like again, I'll show you a few spots. If you bring the family over, I'll share with you a few spots. But look, I've traveled a bit, and like next week I'm going to Japan actually, so I'm super excited about that because I haven't too much of Asia. But nothing beats Greek island summer. I super biased again, but like I think there's something about being on a sandy beach, like not caring about too many things, having nice food. Really simple life, just walking everywhere like barefoot, looking like a homeless person. There's something amazing to that simplicity. There's some particular Greek islands that are, off the beaten path. Many people know about them. You go in and it's almost like you step back in time and people live a very different life. There's something really beautiful about that. So I don't think anything beats that for me. But of course, I'm Greek, so what would I say?
Dude, I love that. Yeah, that like is my ideal vacation right there, dude. Just
that trip to Greece, like, is happening. Like, whether you like it or not, like you just said all the things, like capers, souvlaki, octopus, and you're enjoying that vibe. Like, you just need to come.
Oh my God, I just got to get my kids. I got to get my kids across the pond. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that. That's like my ideal vacation, man. Just like beach vacation, some random like house that's not like a hotel in the middle of like some district with walkable things like coffee shops or restaurants. Walk to the beach, maybe a bike, just, barefoot the whole time. That is my idea.
You're describing Greece, maybe some parts of like Italy and stuff. But yeah, you're basically describing Greece.
That's awesome. For some reason, I moved to Kentucky, which I don't know. That's Not anything. Well, the barefoot thing. A lot of people walk around barefoot in Kentucky, but for different reasons. But all right, dude. Last up, what is your favorite design tool that is not Figma?
Oh, great question. So look, I'll give you a few answers because I can't pick one. I think my latest obsession is Framer. Like I've loved Framer, honestly, for so many reasons, particularly because it gives designers the power to basically create websites without requiring like engineering support. You can do really cool things just by using your like design skills and expertise. So I've loved Framer for that. Like I'm so glad they pivoted into this space. I think it's so interesting. I've spent quite a bit of time like using all the new like AI coding tools. So going from like Bolt and V0 and like Cursor and all those things, you wouldn't call them a design tool. So I can't really give that as an answer. But I think there's something that is super interesting. And I feel like, every designer out there will have the opportunity to become a builder in the next 5 years. So anything that helps you do that, I think is an amazing opportunity. I think in terms of a less popular response, I have to say till this day, I'm so gutted that Principle, the animation tool, that the prototyping tool, like stopped being supported because that was an amazing tool that like really changed how I prototype and how I animated stuff. Such a shame. Great tool, just never got to be supported and get to the next level. But otherwise, that was my all-time favorite for a good like 5-6 years of my career.
Right on. I never used that one. I don't know. It's funny though. Like I've been doing this podcast now for like going on 3 years, and I've asked that same 5 questions like every one of my guests. And it's interesting to hear the evolution because it used to be really hard for people to pick a design tool that wasn't Figma 2 or 3 years ago. And now everyone, there's just so many different tools out there, and it's really interesting to kind of see how this landscape's evolved in the last 3 years. It'd be like really interesting to publish like how the answers and how they changed over time.
Oh yeah.
But
anyway, what's your favorite design tool that's not Figma?
I like Miro, which I
don't
know if that's I don't know if that's a design tool. I would consider a design tool, designing like stuff and getting in there and workshopping. I don't dislike FigJam. We use it for work because it's part of, the license for Figma. But I am a fan of Miro. That's my jam. If I had to pick, I would pick Miro.
I love Miro. I love FigJam. I use both all the time. But it didn't really occur to me as like a design tool. That's why. I spent so much of my day in like Miro and FigJam. Yeah, love these.
Oh yeah, dude. For sure. Yeah, I love a good just a bunch of sticky notes, like virtual sticky notes. And like I love the AI they organize, and like the organization and grouping in Miro. And FigJam is actually pretty good too. But organizing in Miro, the only thing that drives me crazy in FigJam is when you group stuff, it creates a copy. And it doesn't delete the old ones. And I'm like, what? Just extra step. Like, why can't you just delete this? Like, I don't understand. Why would I want to? Anyway, it kind of drives me crazy. But all right, Filippos, this has been awesome, man. Excellent conversation. Anybody out there who might be a manager struggling today or thinking about becoming a lead, design leader, whatever that title looks like for you, I think they're going to get a lot out of this conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights and your expertise with us today. Thank you again. How do you say thank you in Greek? I don't know how to say it. I don't know any words in Greek, to be honest.
You say ευχαριστώ. Means thank you. It's a difficult one.
Say it. Say it again.
Ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστώ.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Ευχαριστώ. Okay.
Man, you're ready for like moving to Greek islands of like migrating with your whole family. It's like quit everything you're doing. Just come over here. Life cheap. It's easy. Like you're gonna have fun.
I love it. Right on, man. All right, dude. Well, thanks again. Ευχαριστώ. I appreciate you coming on.
Parakalo. Thanks so much, man. Really, thanks for the invite. Had a blast speaking with you.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Filippos and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on what leadership really looks like. And I hope we helped you understand that it's not always linear and it doesn't always mean you need to be a manager. But I'm curious, what does your idea of leadership look like? Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you know. And if you know somebody who might find any of this stuff useful, then why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. And if you listened all the way until now, then you've definitely earned a merit-ish badge. Whether you survived tricky team dynamics, Figma fiascos, or pixel-perfect feedback loops, there's a badge with your name on it. Grab 2 sets for $20 at beyonduxdesign.com/badges. Just promise me one thing, you'll show me where you stick them. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, Zoe, and many others, and help keep the show independent and ad-free. You'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And if you're tired of staring at a blank Figma canvas, Mobbin gives you access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows with a library that grows bigger every week. Kickstart your creativity, streamline your workflow, and level up your design process. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX than design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. Just have fun. Feel free to curse if you want to. If not, doesn't matter. There's no rules. I don't really
Only
care.
if I can curse in Greek. If I only curse in English,
curse in
that's no
Greek. Hell
fun.
yeah. Well, you can teach me some Greek curse words. I'm down.